Hello, welcome back to my channel, Hasty Books. I'm Camila, and today I'm doing my March wrap-up, and I'm gonna try to keep this video concise. And I always say that, and it always ends up being like 25 minutes long, but I will try this time. So in March, I've discussed in my April reading plan video and like life update thing. March was really busy, and obviously the end of February was really difficult. I had a lot of anxiety, so my reading took a bit of a dip. And it was just a bit more difficult to read books just generally. So I listened to loads of audiobooks, and I thought that was kind of just easier to absorb books this way. So I read 8 books in March, which is still a lot. I realized that when I say taking a dip, it's just the lowest month of reading that I've had since the beginning of the year, but I'm still really pleased that I managed 8. And 6 of them were audiobooks, so I didn't spend that much time actually reading like properly, but I listened loads, while running, while walking, doing the dishes, cooking, like just in kind of daily life, so it helps to work like that. And out of the 8, there's also 6 that were arcs from NetGalley, and the other 2 were I think they were just books that I had around, or like books that I've been meaning to get to. Alright, so let's go straight into my book reviews. We'll go like book by book, there's only 8 of them. And I'll just say a little bit about if I liked them, what I liked about them, and also any caveats. If I don't like a book, I want to make sure that that doesn't mean you won't like it, obviously, but why potentially it didn't vibe for me. So let's start right away with Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Lynn. This was part of my most anticipated reads of 2022. I never posted that video, but I had I think 10 or 12 titles that I was kind of really looking forward to reading, new novels coming out in 2022. That was one of them, and I got ARC on NetGalley. It was actually an audio ARC, so I listened to the audiobook, and it was so good. I absolutely adored the storytelling, the folklore, the world building, all of the like relationships. It was so intricately weaved. Like there was a lot packed in that book, from relationship with her mother, the moon goddess, and that's what this book is based on. It's the folklore legend of the moon goddess Chang'e, and it's really interesting to see like the daughter and what she learns about her mother and her heritage by going away from it, and then how she becomes acquainted with the celestial kings and queens, and yeah, just her rise to like a military rank, and her power growing, and her becoming so coming into her own. And I thought there was just so many beautiful things about it. I don't think I could fault this book, actually. I think I gave it a 5-star. I just absolutely loved it. And I think if you like fantasy, if you like book based on folklore, if you like a main protagonist that is kick-ass, you will really enjoy this book, and I really recommend it. It is part of a duology, so I actually cannot wait for the second book to come out. Next, I read Long Coast Literary by Elie Alexander. This is kind of like a soft fiction from the US. We follow the main protagonist. She's a girl who I think she quit her job in like tech in California to move to New York to kind of start up in publishing. But like literally it doesn't seem like she's very long into that job when she gets a call from her family that her grandmother has passed away, and she left her a lot. So she left her the house and the business, which is a literary agency business. What a coincidence. But she doesn't really talk to that branch of her family. So it's a bit of like this estrangement going on. She doesn't know why she inherited. But then, yeah, we follow her going to this small town in California. It's very like soft, like everyone knows each other. Everyone's just like, oh yeah, your grandma was lovely. Like it's all very easy, kind of Gilmore Girl vibe, of town. I thought it was a really fun kind of chick lit, soft literature book that dealt with family relationships, grief, because then we learned that she lost her mother when she was young, and she's just lost her grandmother, and she doesn't understand why she didn't have a good relationship with that side of her family. So there's all of that side, but it's also dealing with like editing and with making leaps in your life. So it's making that tie between these small changes that you can make to a book that will then ripple into maybe someone's life. And that was really lovely. I enjoyed the book. There were some things that were really frustrating, but I think this happens to me a lot in soft kind of fiction, where things are so easy and things just happen and resolve themselves without anything, anyone working for it. If you like reading books about, publishing, about editors, if you want a little story based in a lovely village in California, this is a really lovely read. Next, I read Mrs. Death by Salena Godden. This book was an experience, is the best way that I can describe it. This book plays with rhythm, with repetition. It feels almost like a poetic reading, like a performance piece almost. And I had an e-arc, but I did end up, yes, because I had this book for a little while, I did end up finding an audiobook. So I listened to the audiobook. As I said, that was my preferred method in March. And the author read it, and oh my goodness, she read it so, obviously so well, but the way that she actually performed the rhythm and the kind of, sometimes it's poems, sometimes it's short stories, the way she performed them was absolutely amazing. I highly recommend the audiobook. And yeah, it's just, you have to be in for the experience of the piece and some of the themes as well, obviously, about Mrs. Death. And there's really like moving quotes and everything, but you don't expect much of a plot, is like my caveat here to say. Next, I read The Astronaut's Wife by Stacey Morgan. This was a non-fiction about, well, Stacey Morgan is the wife of astronaut Drew Morgan, I believe. And she talks about basically when he made the decision to sign up for the space program, when he was picked as an astronaut, when he was sent off to space, obviously dealing with life and their family and this little massive distance between them while he was out there, and his return in the midst of the pandemic. It is very emotional, very inspirational as well. It's really challenged my assumptions on military wives as well, because that's how they start at the beginning before he signs up to be an astronaut with NASA. And I just love the way that she tied up like personal challenges in people's lives and lessons that she's learned through her journey and her husband's journey and her family's journey. I gave it a generous 4 stars because it actually exceeded my expectations, this book, and it kind of surprised me how good it was and how touched I was by it all. It is very religious. I mean, to me it was. She quotes Bible verses literally all the time. So that took me out of her story at times, but I feel like someone who's potentially more religious than me would maybe relate to that more and enjoy that aspect of the book. Oh yeah, I meant to say that The Astronaut's Wife was also an NetGalley arc. And then I listened to another audio arc, which was The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. This was actually on my 2022 most anticipated list, as well as like Daughter of the Moon Goddess. And I think, unfortunately, that is potentially with the downfall of this book, because it was one of my least favorite books of the month. And by one of them, it was the one that I least preferred. I gave it only 2 stars, which I rarely do give such low stars. And it's because I really did not like it. I did not like the intrigue. I did not like the characters. I didn't know who to root for. I didn't like the structure of it. I thought it was a hot mess. And I also really disliked, that's maybe personal to me, I really dislike the French aspect of this book. I will go in tiny details before we move on to just explain to you what I mean. So I really liked The Guest List and The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley, her last 2 books. And those were set in Ireland and Scotland respectively, and they follow a similar structure in terms of like you find out there's been a murder, but you don't know who's been murdered and who obviously has committed the crime. And then it's usually like enclosed murder kind of thing. So it's like a set of people only that could have done it. And then you have the 2 timelines. In real time when they find the body, and then like going back like 24 hours or something. And that I thought is really cool, and I really enjoyed that kind of structure. This one was different, and I think it was to the detriment of this book, because I don't know if she tried to do something different, but it was messy. it didn't always make sense. Some things were brought up and then never again. They just literally did not matter somehow. There was also a lot packed in into this book, and only if you read it you'll know what I mean. So I'm not going to go into details because it's potentially spoilery. And the other thing I really disliked that I said about the Frenchness of it all, obviously it's called The Paris Apartment. So it's based in Paris, France, which is cool. I like that she sets her novels like all over. But if you have Paris in the name, I feel like it has to, like Paris has to be a character, like a presence. And I don't think it was that much, except for, oh, there's some protests and, oh, people speak French. I don't think there was really that much about Paris in this. It was really weird. And the way the usage of French in this was bizarre. It was mostly curse words. And my biggest pet peeve of this audio arc was actually, obviously, I speak French. So I was quite annoyed with the narrators when they spoke French, and you could tell that they do not speak French. I think only to my ear, one of the, I want to say there was at least 5 narrators, only one of them could speak French to my ear. And I realized that that's something that only a French speaking person will be able to tell. Most English speaking listeners will not care, probably will not be able to tell. But to me, if the written French, like in the book, was written well and it wasn't gibberish, then it should be spoken, like not gibberish. But maybe that's just me being French speaking. My husband says that French speaking people have this thing about French, so maybe this is true. Anyway, did not love it. I don't suggest you start Lucy Foley with this book, and frankly I wish I hadn't bothered reading it. So that says a lot. Let's move on. The last e-arc that I read was 4 Aunties and a Wedding by J.C.Q. Sutanto. This is the second in her kind of Aunties series. So the first one was Dilate for Aunties. And I had really enjoyed it last year. I really enjoyed it. It kind of had exceeded my expectation because it was just really funny and just fun. And yeah, so I was actually looking forward to the second one. I don't know if it was on my most anticipated list of 2022. But when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read it. I was really unsure how she was going to keep up with a second book because there's like a crime in the first one. So you're like, well, what's going to happen in the second one? Is there going to be another crime? Anyway, I was really impressed with the way that she kept it up for the second one. However, it feels very over the top. The second one was even more over the top than the first one in the behaviors of the aunties and like the scenario, what was going on. And things got maybe resolved a little bit and swept under the rug a bit too quickly. But generally, I thought it was just a fun read. If you enjoy the first one, I think you'll enjoy the second one. So, give it a try, and it's just fun literature. Then the last 2 were the books that aren't arcs. So the first one was A Sign of 4 by Arthur Conan Doyle. I just saw it in my library app. It's only a few hours, so I decided to just listen to it one day when I was like vacuuming or something. And yeah, it was good because I'd like to keep going with the whole series. I'd like to finish the Sherlock series. I read the first one, I want to say in 2021 at some point, maybe in the summer. And I actually enjoyed it. It was so much more different than I expected, and it was really good. This one disappointed me a little bit. I think it wasn't very memorable, and yeah, I don't know. It was just disappointing, but I'll keep going. I want to just read all the different stories of Sherlock Holmes and see where it goes. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk about wasn't the last book that I read, but the last book I'm going to talk about is Benjamin Labatut's When We Cease to Understand the World. And this was, I bought that book last year. I saw it was nominated, shortlisted, I believe, for the International Booker Prize because it's translated from Spanish. And so I was like, oh, and he lives in Chile. I have no idea what his heritage is. I don't think it's actually like from Chilean heritage, but whatever. I was just wanting to read authors from Chile, contemporary authors. So I picked it up and I put it in my library, didn't look at it. And then in March, I was actually telling my parents about it because my dad was reading something about scientists. And I was like, I have this book that I think is about scientists. So I literally took it out of my library to show it to my dad. And then I was like, I'll just read it now. And I read this book, half actually reading it, half listening to the audiobook. I thought that really helped me fully get the book. I couldn't have just listened to it though. It was so complicated. There's so many terms of like science and mathematics. Unless you're familiar with that field, I don't recommend listening to the audiobook alone. So I enjoyed having like the pair, the audio and the physical book. It was surprisingly good actually. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it, but some of the stuff that I didn't enjoy as much wasn't surprising, because this book really has a vibe of a man wrote about men, and you will know what I mean if you know what I mean. Look, I don't want to get into details of this. I appreciated reading it because it was such a mixture of nonfiction and fiction. So it was, I believe, obviously everything is obviously his own words, but I believe like the first chapter is like one paragraph is fiction. So he's taken real events and he talks about these real men, like geniuses of mathematics and science, and like all of these things that they've done for the world, that they've discovered, and the world that they lived in their mind to come up with that, but also the severe mental illness that has ensued, and you know, the way that they've pushed boundaries and how they've done that. The way that it was fictionalized, sometimes I was like, wait, is this true? So it made me Google a lot. So I feel like it's definitely a book for inquisitive minds. Like if you want to learn something, this will be a good fiction book to try, but then it'll make you like dig more into other things and like want to do your own research, which is really cool. But yeah, the questionability of the behavior of all of these men is something I did not enjoy, but you know, an interesting read. If you enjoy the field of kind of metaphysics and mathematics and all of that, you may enjoy it. It's definitely an interesting one. It's short, but it's very like technical at times. But yeah, an interesting read. I wasn't completely sure what I felt about it when I was done with it, and I still don't really know completely what I feel about now. If you've read it, let me know what you thought, because I feel like it's one for like a discussion. Like if I feel like it's one that I would learn what I'm feeling about while discussing it with someone, you know? So these were the 8 books that I read in March. It wasn't quite the month that I expected, but I ended up having some very good reads, some really disappointing ones, but some really good ones that I'm really pleased that I finally got to. And you know, I tackled a few of my arcs, so that's always good. And yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books, if you're interested in reading any of them, what you thought. I'm always interested in hearing your opinion, you know, don't hesitate to share. And yes, thank you so much for watching. Come back soon for more wrap-ups and more book talk. And don't forget to subscribe. And I see you back. Bye.